Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review is brought to you in part by Dean's Hobby Stop in Owasso, Michigan. Dean's has one of the Midwest's largest selections of used kits at great prices. They also feature new kits and supplies as well. Call Dean's to get their mail order list featuring hundreds of vintage kits, or check their website for great deals on both new and classic models. This review covers Richard Earl's Pro Mod Racer in 1/25th scale. It's the 1958 Plymouth Fury known as Christine. Now this is a single-purpose kit, meaning there's only one version in the box, and it's from Revell, number 7350. It's out of the 90s racing scene came this Christine Racer, and it featured a 1600 horsepower, 557 cubic inch Chrysler Wedge engine that ran in the mid-7s on the quarter mile. Now this kit contains 132 parts molded in red with chrome and clear parts, and the tires are black vinyl. Now it's rated for the advanced builder due to the number of small parts and large decals. When it's completed, the kit measures about 9 1/4 inches long, 2 1/4 inches high, and 3 inches wide. Oh, hey, that sounds like Newt. Newt's got something to say about this one. What do you got there, Newt?
The front end looks kind of flat, like it's not real. Why didn't they just use a chrome part for the grille?
Say, that's a great observation, Newt, and that's because the original race car's front end was just airbrushed on to look like a real grille. So it was actually flat, just like the model decal is. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, they're mostly molded in red with some chrome pieces and some clear windows. And you also see that the tires, the rear slicks, come in two pieces. You will have to assemble those. We'll be using mostly liquid cement for this construction, sometimes super glue for fragile parts like the roll cage, and sometimes white or clear glue for the glass pieces. And don't forget to use the manufacturer safety and use guidelines when you use any of the products that you hear or see used in the review. Here are the decals for the kit, and as you can see, they're very colorful. The register was pretty good, but they were old, and they didn't really want to cooperate like fresh ones, so you'll have to be patient if you're going to use the original decals on your model. Well, construction will start with the engine as per usual, and notice too that some of the parts are chrome plated here, and you must remove or scrape off any of the chrome plating, or paint for that matter, if you want the parts to stick together with glue. After a light coat of primer dries for the engine pieces, they'll be sprayed aluminum color. Also aluminum. The headers shown here are of the two-piece variety. You have to assemble each side before installing them, and as you see here, they are put into place on the engine and setting just as they should, with the collectors pointing towards the back. And just to recap here, of course, the valve covers were highlighted with the Christine in red. Actually, you can just scrape off the aluminum. And the oil breathers were added along with the semi-gloss black manifold and the aluminum quad carbs there. Now we're going to add the rest of the front end pieces, the fan, etc., and we're going to complete the motor. The forward part of the frame goes together pretty easily. You just have to be patient and make sure that everything is square and at 90 degrees to everything else, of course, and paint that a gloss black. And here you can see, with the engine mounted into position, it looks pretty good, and it just needs to be, you just need to make sure that it's straight up and down perpendicular to the plane of the frame. Now assemble all the parts for the rear end. You can see the links here and the struts, etc. Also, that one piece is chrome, but we're going to assemble this per the instructions. And by the way, those are at the end of the review here. We're going to paint these all semi-gloss or gloss black once you've gotten them assembled. Just make sure everything's square to each other. Now you can go ahead and attach the mounting points in the wheel well there for the rear end and get that assembled. You might want to use some strong glue here, maybe some super glue, to make sure these pieces stay in position. And simultaneously, by the way, as you're placing that rear end into place, put the drive shaft into the back of the transmission there and into the rear end housing. And we're also going to be adding the wishbone locator at the same time. Now locate the steering rack and paint that aluminum. And when that's dry, you can also detail the boots with some flat black. And now locate the oil tank, and you can paint that aluminum as well. After those parts have dried, scrape the paint off. Where you're going to glue them, you can see the oil tank there is mounted on the firewall, and the rack is up front. So go ahead and glue those into position. Locate the left and right engine truss bars there. Go ahead and paint those black, and once they've dried, glue them into position up to the firewall. Next, you'll probably want to refer to the instructions for detail, but we're going to locate the steering shaft through a hole in the firewall, and then it gets glued to the steering rack up front. You can see the red arrow pointing to the location where they join. The shock struts there are painted aluminum and flat black, and they're now added underneath the truss bars. And you can also see that the right brace tubes, then you see the arrow pointing to them, are added underneath there. The radiator, the cooling fan, and lower hose are now going to be assembled. So go ahead and paint the radiator aluminum, and the cooling fan is black, and the lower hose is flat black with aluminum hose clamp detail. And after those dry, you can go ahead and assemble them, and then place the radiator and the lower hose into place on the front end. Next, you can go ahead and detail the upper radiator hose like the lower, and then we're going to put that into position, and we're also going to add the brake backing plates there to the spindles. So note that the brake backing plates have been painted aluminum, and the paint has been scraped away from the spindle for adhesion. Now we can assemble the tires and wheels, and please note that these have some Goodyear markings on them. These are aftermarket decals, but they do have some detail markings that are embossed into the tires. You could actually try and hand paint those to highlight them. Now the wheel backs, of course, are aluminum, and I use some of BSI's tire glue to assemble the rear slicks there, and then of course the wheels just slide in and can be mated to the spindles. In my case, of course, I like to glue them into position. These are not rollers. They are basically just put into place on the car and the chassis, making sure that the tires are all square to the body. Now we can begin some work on the interior, and the roll cage parts are all painted black with some silver detail on the fire bottle there and red, and then the dash is red to match the outer body with an aluminum color panel there. Now the gauges have enough raised detail that you can paint the faces with a light coat of white and then black wash them to bring out some of the detail there to make that look more realistic. And now with those parts painted for the interior, you can assemble those as per the instructions. And also note that we're going to add the frame extension in the rear at this time too, which is also aluminum color. We'll get the parts out of the kit to complete the interior. Paint the seat and headrest flat black, and then detail paint the tachometer to match the dash gauges. Now the fuel oxidizer is silver with blue tanks, and there's a bit of black wash on the top to bring it out. Now the upper part of the roll cage is also gloss black, and the steering wheel is black too. Now, as you can see, with the roll bar completed there, and the roll cage and the other pieces that we've just talked about put into place, we're looking at a substantial underpinning for the rest of our vehicle, a nice looking underbody chassis in the Pro Mod style. There's a shipping brace in the body here that needs to be removed, so go ahead and trim that off, and then use some flat sandpaper files to clean up the edges. Now we want to locate the parts for the hood and the scoop, And notice that the scoop is split vertically. So assemble the scoop, let a little glue squeeze out there, and when it's dry, sand that off nice and smooth. Use a little body filler if you need to, some putty, and then go ahead and assemble the hood. Now go ahead and glue the front bumper and filler panel into place there. And you'll need to do some sanding there where the seams and the edges are between the grill area and the front fenders, and clean that up so that it looks nice. Next, you can glue the rear foil and the splitters into place back there, and the hood should be taped into position prior to final cleanup and painting. Now on this model, before we do too much painting, we're going to go ahead and mark the Deutz fasteners there. Those are the quarter turn fasteners for the body panels, etc. And you want to mark them so that you don't inadvertently sand those off when you're prepping the body for primer and paint. With all those fasteners located, we can start looking at the body. The fender panels have some, flash and parting lines on them. Go ahead and mark those, and then when that goes away, you know that you've removed the parting lines successfully. And next we'll use a sanding pad or some sandpaper to go ahead and remove all of the markings and blemishes and give the body just a nice rough finish for paint. Now once you've got that body blemish free and it's up to your standards, you can go ahead and start giving the body some light dust coats of primer. Not too thick. Don't go with a really wet heavy coat. Just get the first coats on there of some nice even strokes and give it a primer spray. Where you've got some vertical fins, you're going to have to approach that from directly overhead and then go in from about a 45-degree angle into those little crevices that you can't get straight overhead, like on the hood scoop. With the primer coat dry, we can now start adding color coat to our model, and we're going to approach it from the same strategy here. We're going to start with some light dust coats and then just kind of add those in and work up to full wet coats as we get closer and closer to having a good color depth on all portions that looks the same on the entire model. Now I used a one-shot brand L104 bright red enamel for this. It's pretty forgiving paint. It was made initially for sign painters, so I've found that it works pretty nicely and it gives a good gloss. So we'll finish up and spray our Christine a beautiful red color now. Now once your paint has fully dried, the color coat is it sometimes takes a few days. Just sand out any blemishes, any orange peel or debris, and then we're going to apply the decals at this time. Now these decals were difficult to install because they wanted to curl, and that's an effect of their age. They just were pretty old, so I put them on, but you had to kind of finesse them with some brushes to make sure that they stayed down. You can try some setting solutions, but that didn't really work for me. It started to kind of curl them up too much. So you'll have to be patient unless you use some of the newer aftermarket decal sets that are available. Now make sure that you don't sand through the prime coat before you put your decals on, and then we're going to clear coat over the decals afterwards. Now after they have completely dried, the body can be clear coated, and you just again start with light coats and you work up to a wet coat a little at a time to avoid any runs. Now that your clear coat is thoroughly dried, you can work on those windows. The ribs, of course, braces, and all of the surrounds need to be painted flat black on the inside of the windows. And you can either use tape to get a good clean line, or a very straight brush, or even a large marker that's got a cutout in it. So go ahead and get those done, and then you can apply the window glass with some white glue or some of the clear cement glues for windows, and go ahead and install those into position. And now you can go ahead and apply those decals to the window areas, the sponsor decals, etc. This one has more than quite a few of them, but just make sure that you use plain warm water, and then you can clean it off very nicely after they've been applied. Now grab those tail lights, and we're going to paint the lenses a dark red color and let those dry. And now scrape the plating and paint from the adhering areas, and go ahead and install those tail lights in the back end. And now the spoiler support, the parachute supports and the parachutes get painted flat black. Finally, you can go ahead and glue those into position. You may need to use a little super glue and just remove the plating and paint and put those into place, and your model is essentially finished. As I mentioned, this is a single purpose kit, just one version of the car in the kit. There was one piece left over that I didn't see a use for, but most everything else gets used up. Well, there you have it. This absolutely gorgeous replica kit. It's a vintage kit, but they're still out there and available on online auctions, etc. I mean, it's going to take some patience with the decals, but when you're done, it builds into just a gorgeous detailed replica of the actual Christine. So it's well worth the effort to build, and the kit's designed to have a removable body, so you can actually just pull it off and show the interior chassis after it's finished. So if I were you, I'd find one, buy it, and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you liked this step-by-step premium model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews. Or you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks!